Good evening. This morning we woke up to the news on Bloomberg is that 4 European countries have agreed to pay or have paid the Russian government for gas and oil deliveries in rubles, and that is done through the Gazprom bank, basically circumventing the sanctions. The sanctions primarily were instituted to weaken the Russian state, the Russian finances, the Russian ruble, to destabilize the currency. That has yielded mixed results the way it was implemented. And the overall thing is, the question is, we're not dealing with a third world country here, which has to have US dollars or Swiss franc or pound sterling or euros to purchase weapons on the black market somewhere. This is not this kind of a thing. We're not dealing with that here. We're dealing with a superpower which sent the first men out of space, and they have completely different resources. Now, the idea also was to target the oligarchs, the friends of Vladimir Putin, in the anticipation that his rich buddies, friends, basically are going to then go to Vladimir and say, Vladimir, you got to stop this. They're taking my money away. This is a very Western thinking, and it is based on the idea of lobbying in a democracy, of what we're seeing here in our Western world, in Europe, especially United States, Canada, primarily. If the government takes any action, you will have lobbying groups become very, very active very quickly with money donations or withdrawing money donations to politicians wherever they seem it fit, in order to correct the course in this whole thing. That is one of the parts of democracy. In this thinking here, this shows you on how limited our Western thinking is when we deal with other cultures. It was thought, because Russia is part of the WTO and they're part of the globalization scheme, that that could be accomplished, that these companies and the oligarchs would go to Vladimir and say, Vladimir, you got to stop this, like when Gerhard Schröder flew over there to talk to him, which obviously did not yield anything. Now, what they did is, what they have accomplished is, they have seized the boats, these super yachts from these rich people. They have seized some of their bank accounts. They have seized apartments. And the reality in this is the same with the oil and the gas, which is still being bought globally. It hasn't stopped yet. Poland and Bulgaria were the ones who said no, and they were already prepared because they knew what was coming. They had dealt with the Soviet Union for a long time, so they had a more profound understanding of what they were up against. In this instance here, this did not happen and has not materialized. The governor of Baden-Württemberg in Germany, in the southwestern part of Germany, he said it early on. He didn't believe that these sanctions would dissuade Putin and his government from doing the special military operations. And this is normally the cases when you get to this point, that a nation has totalitarian, is in the process of establishing a totalitarian system, that they will not listen to any outsiders. On the other hand, they're going to maneuver them way through as much as they can in order to circumvent or to alleviate sanctions, in this case financial sanctions. The disruption in the SWIFT market, with having first the central bank disconnected from SWIFT and then other major financial institutions, really hasn't done that much either, because there is still several consumer banks which conduct transactions between any place in the world and Russia. You couldn't turn that just off just like this. This hasn't happened yet. What has happened, for instance, is that Russia has announced that they will be paying their bonds, their dollar-denominated bonds they issued as the country, as the state, would be paid in ruble, because the first payments they had to make in March were they have a bank involved in this, which is the Chase Manhattan, or J.P. Morgan Chase in New York City. What Chase does, or J.P. Morgan Chase does, is it gets the money which has to be paid out, interest rates, or the bonds have to be paid back in full and that sort of stuff. It gets that money from the Russian central bank wire transfer via SWIFT, in their corresponding bank they have in Moscow. And then that money is basically distributed from New York to the individual bondholders. Whoever owns these bonds or had purchased them is the rightful owner at the time. That could be coupon interest payments, annually, quarterly, whatever they were issued in, or when these bonds were issued, whatever they were, issued for these payments. Now, because of the sanctions, J.P. Chase Morgan has to go to the U.S. government and has to get the payouts approved, because they had received the money via transfer from the Russian Federation, from the Russian government. Those payouts were done in March. The U.S. government allowed them. Now, the ones which came due in April, the U.S. government blocked them. So J.P. Chase Morgan has gotten $58 billion from Russia, or from the central bank, the Russian Federation Central Bank. And that money is sitting now in New York City at J.P. Chase Morgan, waiting to be distributed to the bondholders, but they can't because the U.S. government has blocked it. So now you can see the actual people who are affected by this is that could be whoever owns these bonds. People who have invested into BRIC funds, for instance, Brazil, the BRICS, that is Brazil, Russia, India, and China, the BRIC nations. Then you have, estates or endowment funds. Those things, there's probably a few personal investors in there. Mostly going to be other financial institutions, because they were a pretty, secure source of money. And of course, they are protected, or there are credit default swaps out there, which is basically an insurance. And it looks like it that the credit default swap issuers will have to pay, because the U.S. government has now blocked the payout of it. So it's not that Russia has not paid or sent the money to the banks or to the people trying to, but has the bank who is in charge of distributing the funds is blocked by the U.S. government of doing so. So this brings now a whole question that you have to question this, is who is actually going to pay the price for this war? And it looks like it primarily it is the people with financial interests in Russia, or like the oligarchs, those folks, Western European or American companies who own or operated businesses there, and they cannot fully operate, or they have to operate now because they were threatened by the Russian government that their employees would be arrested if the foreign entity is going to stop operations there. And the company or that operation would have been basically expropriated, or would be expropriated by the Russian Federation government. And to avoid this, they were given the opportunity to resume operations. So this is what you got now. So that's why you see DHL trucks driving around in Moscow and in other places, and that's why certain things are still available and operational. What has ceased is basically airline operations, so the airline business is lost. It is primarily, and then all the Western goods which went into the stores and that sort of stuff in Russia, which came from the West, that sort of has ceased to be redelivered or restocked. They're going to sell whatever they have if they haven't closed the stores yet, or they may have closed the stores, but they're still there, so they're not paying any rent to the malls anymore. So this is really the economical fallout is on that front, that it is primarily the business sector which has been hit the hardest in this. It is the Vladimir Putin and the Russian Federation primarily is still operating in that special military operation, the war, and the businesses, the oligarchs are out of their money, and they are trying to hold together whatever they can hold together. In the Western European companies, they're wondering if they're going to lose everything. There are several companies who have written everything off already, which goes into the billions. This is going to trickle through the stock market. And then you have the bondholders, like I said, for the Russian Federation bonds, which were issued. The total volume of dollar-denominated bonds is somewhere in the range of $200 to $300 billion, which is going to fail. This has to be paid out in CDSs, credit default swaps. That is the insurance one can purchase, which was cheap until 2-3 months ago. Now it is very expensive to buy it. You probably can't buy it because it is an impending default. And it means that they're going to get 60 or 75 cents on the dollar they had originally invested. So if that was, say, like an endowment who had bought $10 million of those bonds, whatever bond it was, they will be able to recuperate $7.5 million or $6 million, somewhere in that range, from the credit default swap issue. And that is going to be a tremendous burden again then on the financial sector. Banks who issues that financial institution, you have Goldman Sachs, these kind of global banking players in there, they will have to carry those losses in this, even though the Russian Federation has the money available actually to pay for it. And this is why I said this somehow the other way. If you wanted to expropriate wealth, from rich individuals, Russian individuals in this case, then the West has definitely become the henchman for Vladimir Putin. If that would have been his goal, to have his friends basically expropriated, then that would have worked quite well. We are supporting here now a system, or we're starting to help a system which seems to be reliving or trying to relive their Soviet Union heydays, in glory and communism with Leninism and everything else what came with it. I hope not Stalinism, but it kind of looks like it to a certain extent. Now, in all of this, I wanted to mention another thing, is I have not raised the subject of the genocides yet. And that is something which will come, and I'm awaiting the reports which are going to come from Den Haag when the investigators are done. Then we have a much clearer picture of which military unit actually committed what crimes, how they were affected, and how many total numbers we're looking at. And then we get a much clearer picture, and then we can actually look at this and analyze it. At this point, we have seen the pictures. We know something happened. We don't have the full details yet. The reporting on a lot of these things is very emotional, so it's not very fact-based. And it seems to be pointing into a very sad picture. I can tell you that at the moment, of what trickles through there, of what they're finding, and what the deal is. I hope for the Ukrainian army is that they're sticking to the Den Haag protocols, of conducting warfare, and the Geneva Convention, because then they have to be better than the Russians. Otherwise, this will not work right, because if they're going to commit war crimes and the other side commits war crimes, then it's going to be a very, very, very murky picture. This includes the treatment of prisoners of war, the entire thing that comes with it. The Americans, when they entered World War II, adhered to the Geneva Convention to 99.9% of the time, and they had extreme high standards in trading prisoners of war. In terms of the food and the accommodations and everything, they were a role model, and only because of that being that role model in that war, the United States was able to conduct really the Nuremberg trials. The Russian Red Army had also committed an awful lot of atrocities on their way back, but this was known and it was documented. But because they were the victor at this point, the Americans sort of, even though they had a real sore stomach about it, that is well documented, with the Russians' behavior, they really did not want it to appear in one courtroom with the Russian military judicial personnel, which was assigned to the Nuremberg trials. That's probably the best way to say it. So especially the Ukrainian High Command and the Ukrainian officers have to remind their troops and their men that they have to stand up to the highest possible standards in this, if it comes to the Geneva Convention and Den Haag and everything what comes goes along with it, that they are fighting a very, very clean war. Otherwise, you can't really point the fingers at the other side. That is something we have to remember, and I would strongly urge the Ukrainian army to do that. There's a lot to lose in this. You can win a lot and you can lose a lot, and that is one part which you will have to win, looking at the future of your country, and being the moral authority in this war. Right now you're somewhat the victim, but in order to be victorious, you have to be also the moral winner in this war and have higher standards than your opponent, and you don't want to lower yourself down there. I'm pretty sure that they know this, and from what I've seen, the officers, Ukrainian officers, which are on YouTube, they are conducting themselves in a very, very professional manner. We have not seen any pictures or photos from the battlefields. A lot of time with the photographic material, it is very difficult to judge because we don't know if something was photoshopped yet or not. That's another reason why I'm waiting for the reports from Den Haag War Crimes Tribunal to see what they come up with and what they're finding and what they're not finding. And then we will see if there's any accusations from the Russian side and see what they have to say, if there's anything valid. Things go wrong in a war and people act up under the amount of stress and the turmoil and the psychological anxieties you're suffering in it, and people do mistakes in that. There's no question about it. So we have to see what is going to come out of it. But that's what I would say. As they say, is you can't throw with rocks if you sit in a glass house. That's pretty much the reality in this. Let me see, was there anything else today? I can't think right now. It has been a long day and a pretty busy day, and I was wondering if there was something. We had talked about the sanctions and then the genocide. We touched that really quick. Yeah, that was pretty much it. The question is just going to work or not. I don't think so. It doesn't look like it. The other thing is, what I also found is today is the Defense Secretary of the United States had said yesterday in Ramstein that he thanked the German defense minister for the 50 cheetahs. I thought it was 100. I think the German news media had reported 100 of them. So he may have had the wrong information, or Germany may have printed it was in the FAZ, Welt, and the Süddeutsche. All three had the same numbers. So I don't know if he had the wrong number, only half of it, or if the news media had been given the wrong number by the defense ministry. That I couldn't tell you for sure. We will see on how this is going to develop. I hope that they're going to go through with this. And we will see what the long-term relationships are going to be between all these, the European Union, the United States, Canada, and Russia in the future in this, to see which way this is going to go. At this point, it doesn't look very promising. Putin said today in St. Petersburg, so I don't know if he made it actually to Kaliningrad or not, but he was in St. Petersburg. That was only reported by Bildzeitung, the German boulevard paper, and I wouldn't put a lot of truth into this. That he spoke today, yes, because they repeated what he said in TASS and two other Russian newspapers, but the Russian newspapers didn't say at what location he spoke. Bild pointed to St. Petersburg. He should have been in Kaliningrad. So we don't really know for sure where he was. But what he said was he warned anyone who would use strategic weapons. And I think the risk, what he's pointing out, is what I had pointed out in one of my other videos, is that, for instance, Joe Biden has no interest in taking possession or invading the Russian Federation. You're not going to see Joe Biden in a Lincoln town car doing victory laps on the Red Square in front of the Kremlin in Moscow. This is completely out of the question. So their anxiety or their concern is because that picture is not real, or that it's not going to materialize, that the United States may just use nuclear weapons against Russia to have them stop the war in the Ukraine as a deterrent, basically to tell them to stop. I think that is highly unlikely that Joe Biden or anyone in that administration is going to actually do a first launch, or the initial launch of any type of nuclear long-range bombings into the Russian Federation to stop this. They're going to stay with the strategy where they have to do the least amount possible, so NATO doesn't get involved. Man, material, and mouse, everything that we say, is not going to get involved. We're just going to give them the weapons to the Ukraine, and logistics and support and ammunition, and then they have to battle that out with the Russians. This is probably as far as it's going to go. A strategic first strike from NATO or from the United States, I would say 99.99% it's not going to happen. Even if they were to engage into a full battle for Kiev, you're probably going to see weapons and stuff like this going into Ukraine for the Ukrainian army, but you will not see NATO, and you will not see anything else than just weapons. That's as far as it's going to get, and you definitely won't see any nuclear first strikes from the United States into Russia. That is almost impossible. If we get attacked, this would be a counter response, yes, and the same would be true if we get attacked in the NATO territories. Then there will be a response to this, but otherwise there won't be any particular military action out of any of the stuff. That I'm very, very certain. And with that, we had a pretty good day so far. And again, thank you again, everyone, for subscribing and liking my videos. And I don't know when I'm going to be back here. I actually thought I'm going to do the video today about the Order of the Black Eagle, but then with the day and now this news, what we had, I wanted to talk about the sanction first. And I'm trying to keep these videos now between 20 to 30 minutes, so they're not too long. Because it becomes very draining, to listen to 1 hour of a person talk. I think 20 minutes to 30 minutes is okay. And with that, you have a great evening. And peace. We're going to pray for peace. Thank you.